Part 3, Chapter 3, Simpatico. About a mile from the school, right off the main strip that carts all comers through my little town, there sits a unique little gas station. Most people I know refer to it as the Hub, or any slight variation of that name. It's that one place almost everyone stops before, after, and during class. It has everything one could need, and a few surprises that keep interest roused. Behind the gas station is a medium-sized trailer home where the owners live. It's there that the surprises are conceived and alchemized to life. In their backyard, visible through the gas station unisex bathroom window, is an outdoor convection oven. Bulky, matted from overuse, and always ejecting ambrosial smoke into the air. Homemade bread, baked goods, and even thin-crusted pizza. Nothing is stranger than driving by at any given time and smelling diesel mixed with rising dough. I wrote a paper for a creative writing project all about it. The gas station itself had been there since before the school was built, so at least 70 years. Before it became what it is today, it was a ramshackle dump falling in on itself and only provided fuel a few times a month if the previous owner decided to get a delivery. Inside was a lot of blocked-off empty space and a dirty checkout counter with nothing but old maps and pinwheels for sale. When the school was being built, the gas station was purchased by a couple in their mid-30s, a couple who moved to this quiet little town in search of real estate that would allow them to integrate and serve their community. That couple was Elliot and Valerie Kell, my old history teacher's parents. In the first year, they remodeled the entire building, repaved the parking lot, upgraded the pumps, and stocked every shelf with commonplace provisions. They were always running some promotion or introducing a limited-time item to attract new customers and keep the locals coming. You couldn't go into any public place without seeing some form of advertisement. When I was a kid, my mom would take me shopping there. Even though the prices were slightly higher than the local market, it was less about the money and more about the welcoming experience. While she shopped around, I was adopted behind the counter and played with Valerie. Sometimes, I would just sit on the stool and watch the little television that always had a movie playing for ambience. Other times, Valerie would read to me or play jacks. No matter the reason for stopping in, I was always left with the sentiment that it was simply a special place. Unfortunately, after the incident with Mr. Kell, his parents shut down the gas station for some time to mourn. The whole town felt the impact of this, and even more so when news spread about his extracurricular activities with some of his students. When the first came forward, the rest fell like dominoes. Things at the gas station feel almost inverted now. For obvious reasons, I couldn't set foot in the store for a long while. His parents were getting up in age, and the mess and loss of their only child accelerated the wrinkles on their faces by 10 years. Even now, as the soft tang of an overhead bell announced my exit from the gas station, I endured dense fault writhing in my belly. Neither Elliot nor Valerie worked the register today, just some part-timer with a lazy eye and quiet disposition. I meandered for a few minutes but felt scrutiny from the single security camera and the cynical demon under my skin. There were no cookies or muffins, no smell of fresh pizza, not even the familiar chemical trail of cinnamon air freshener, which was always a point of contention between the old married couple. It felt wrong when I entered, and wrong when I left without a word. Now I was on the road again, home on my mind. The roads were quiet, and there was a distinct lack of a breeze. Just the lonely scrape of my heels against the pavement edge, ankles bending from misplaced rocks and bottle caps. The hard plastic headphones looped over my neck blared a song I usually skipped during quiet study sessions. The cord made a U-shape in front of my torso, curling past my side and entering a gap in my backpack pocket. 1/3 of the way home, and I popped the top off my glass bottle of root beer. The frothy frizz did little to remedy the guilty stomachache, but the rich nutmeg bark flavor I loved as a kid sparked something wonderful in me. Clashing, divisive, I sipped to the halfway point before Alice spoke up. "That's your third soda this month." Her voice positioned at the center of my brain and recalled my wandering thoughts. So, is that a problem? The bottle rested against my lip, and I blew air through my nose to make an airy whistle. I took another sip and lowered it to my side. "You get headaches from the sugar, which makes you irritable, and not in the fun way that I can use. just annoying. I could see the field that marked Old Route 43 and cross the street, only a short distance from the long desolate stretch. What are you, my dad? Alice sneered. Nope, 'cause I'm still alive. Unfazed, I glanced at the block of houses before taking the turn and starting the final trek. Wow, haven't heard that one in a while. How original. She gave an empty laugh and then lowered her voice. Seriously though, what gives? You kicked the habit a long time ago. I thought you liked just juice and tea with the occasional cup of coffee. I rolled the bottle with my thumb and four fingers, feeling the slick condensation tempt my grip and chill the skin. I'm just living my life. No need to analyze everything I do. Could you at least pick a different flavor? It's always root beer, she griped. Root beer makes me happy, I said plainly, staring ahead without a flicker of observation in my eyes. I took another big gulp and made it a point to fully dissect it. The carbonation tap dancing down my throat, the stifle of air as another chug brought prickles to my eyes, the pop of my lips breaking away from the bottle with a satisfied exhale, sloshing the last dribble of foam collected on the bottom. I smirked as the image of Alice ejecting her tongue in disgust flickered. Ugh, I hate it. I hate it so much. I snickered, then slipped the empty bottle into the side pouch of my backpack. I bobbed my head to the sound of the music and clapped my hands together, wringing the condensation between my fingers. As I did this, I found myself tenderly caressing the ring. It was cold, but hinted at some buried life at its core, like a fading ember with a frozen furnace, no longer able to keep the darkness at bay. My expression shifted to contemplative, and my shoulders tensed. I got this tickle in the back of my neck that begged me to itch, but I couldn't stop rubbing the ring. I felt like I had to, otherwise it would berate me, shout my secrets for nature to hear. I started walking fast, and I didn't even notice that I had already passed my old house and took the first turn. What is it? Alice jolted me. My hands separated, and I twisted my wrist to crack it. Huh? Nothing. You're a terrible liar. Not true. I reached behind me and pulled up the zipper enough to remove the CD player. I then switched it off and took off the headphones, bundling it up and dropping it back into my bag. I've been lying to everyone I know for most of the past year. Avoiding telling them the truth and actively misleading them are not the same thing. I would bet Liumix Essence that if one of your friends asked you straight, did you murder your father, you would say yes, because you're so guilty, she emphasized in a bratty tone. I didn't reply for another 100 feet. I'm just in a weird headspace today. Can't really stay in one place. She pondered, already knowing the answer. Maybe you're pent up too. Letting me out and exerting some energy will surely reset things. But you know what'll help more? Some juicy blood and guts, she said sinisterly. Oh, for sure. I'll consider that option. If you want blood so bad, I'll just cut my arm open again, you freak. She cackled under her breath. It did give me a wonderful seize. You're so sweet to bleed for me. I flicked my wrist, recalling the jagged edge of the steak knife. The self-inflicted cuts were hashed into my left wrist as a test of her recovery and my own macabre fascination/punishment, and it took a bit to heal over and match the surrounding skin tone. Still, every single injury I've sustained since Alice were vividly etched into my soul, imagined in perfect detail as if I were experiencing them for the first time. I shivered and looked up from the tar. I was approaching the last turn. I let the conversation lapse. I wasn't much in the mood to talk anymore, and instead found myself just mismanaging a head full of fireflies. Blips of thoughts, memories, dreams, predictions, worries, all impacting me at random points and interrupting one another. The dulcet scrape of my shoes on the blacktop was merely a whisper, and the peripheral colors and shapes of my immediate neighborhood just mushed into blobs of blurry indescribables. I arrived at the front door and set my bag in front of it. Normally, I would dig the key out from underneath the fake rose bush just beside the door, but I had an obligation to fulfill. I rounded the house and brushed past the slightly overgrown, lush grass, passing the standing pole with dangling bird feeders and reaching the tree line behind the house in about 30 seconds. I turned and faced the house, detailing the propane tanks against the back walls, the multiple windows, and the small shed. I purposely kept my senses dulled as I entered the forest. The standout differences of these woods compared to my old house are these trees were mostly birch, thin javelins jutting in such a way as to trick depth perception. Tall grass and low clusters of tangled bushes provided waist-high cover. Almost 50 feet in, and the tree line converted to a mixture of birch and tall oaks. I pushed through, weaving over and around roots and thick trunks, looking back to confirm obscurity. 200 feet in, and the house was barely visible. I reached the first clearing, slowing my pace to recall the first few outings. Lots of crudely cut trunks stuck out of the ground like a spike trap. The soil was exposed and scattered in tens of mounds, and any rock large enough to trip over were cut and shattered. Alice's buzz rose in my ears. She was preparing herself. I pushed forward to the second location, passing through the small clearing and entering the forest again. Another 100 feet, and I stopped. Turning in a full circle, I confirmed there were no visible buildings through the wood and then shut my eyes. Alice's borrowed keen sense declared there were no people anywhere close to us, so I kept my eyes shut and relaxed all my muscles. "You ready?" I spoke, removing my beanie and hooking it on a snapped branch. She grinned. "Let's do this." I nodded and shifted my entire existence. My fingers curled tight, then released. My ankles twisted and feet dug into the dirt. My head rose slightly and a long breath was drawn in through my nose. My bubble of perception compressed down to the first layer of skin. Deaf, blind, I started to dig. My father came to mind and all the terrible things he'd done. Then each and every prank, insult, and physical retort Stacy offered over the years piled onto that. Then the visual of Kel dead on the ground was added to the fire. All of this worked well enough to heat my blood, but I struggled to break away. Wincing, forcing my lungs to seize, I wobbled in place as my skin started to turn ashy. Needles poked my eyes, and multiple points of pressure applied to the area surrounding my lips. I dug deeper. Destro and Lyomic appeared back to back, each radiating with spite and drenched in the blood of all they killed. I could see the personal ghosts, the martyrs, the victims, faceless and cast in shadow, screaming and begging. A single tear that didn't belong to me slipped free, and I dropped to my knees.
"Hold it tight,"
Alice shouted, though her voice was distant. My eyes shot open, and a hazy purple filter washed over my vision. Suddenly my spine lurched toward the sky, and I was now face down in the dirt. Coughing, body fritzing with jolts and stabbing pains, I flopped to the side and violently shook. Razor strings sprouted from my lips and sliced in arcs, knotting my mouth shut and flooding my face with pain. My skin turned completely gray, and every single hair on my head rose off my skull. Flapping with a magical wind contained only to me, it grew out, staining black with every additional inch until it passed my shoulders and reached the middle of my back. I felt a snap and let all the air out of my trembling lungs. I rolled onto my back, panting with a new purple glow in the abyssal black eyes, staring up through the concealing leaves and branches. My hand flattened onto the ground and clutched a bundle of dirt, settling into my own little chamber while Alice became me. She panted, "Why was that so much harder than last time?" "I don't know," I replied. "I told you I was feeling off today." She sat up, throwing the dirt and snarling. "So damn inconsistent. It's gonna get us killed." "I'm sure if we were actually in danger, I wouldn't have any issues. It's not easy just conjuring a bunch of negative feelings with the intention of letting it overpower me. That goes against everything people learn about self-control and healthily managing our emotions. Especially me," I half shouted, dizziness pinning me in place. She braced herself on one knee and then got to her feet. "Whatever. Anyway, let's go collect the neighbor's eyes." She sneered. "Ha ha. You know what would happen if you did that. We've been over it." She grinned, rolling her shoulders and bouncing up and down to loosen up. "I still don't think you'd have it in you to off yourself. You'd have to get pretty creative to get around my healing." I argued. "I've got a list of ways that could work." She bent her knees and started looking for targets.
I bet that list existed before I was around.
No, surprisingly, I wasn't that bad off mentally. Well, I mean, I did some stupid shit, but never made any plans.
What a brave little soldier,
she mocked, before wasting no time and blitzing the thickest oak tree in sight. The sudden momentum of her angsty movement pushed me back slightly, and the rip of her claws bursting free made my ethereal body waver and my fingertips get hot. She closed the 20-foot gap in a second and slashed the tree horizontally, sending splinters and bark in that direction. Her claws were 2 feet in length, but only the first 5 inches were used to cut. She then reversed with her left hand and made the same cut in a crunched X shape. Completing the spin from a slashing momentum, she jumped up and kicked the weak point, launching herself back a few feet and sending a shockwave of energy through the wood. An echoing crack bounced between the trees as it started to tilt backward. Then, as it broke free and began its death drop, Alice dashed around to the other side and positioned herself at the halfway point. She planted her feet and raised her head, submerged in the shadow and watching it fall directly on top of us. I felt the urge to move, but she overrode my command and turned slightly to the side, throwing both arms up, retracting her claws, and catching the tree. A reverberant slam rippled through the forest, and her feet were pressed inches into the dirt. The bark jammed into her palms, and a fickle trembling started after a few seconds. She let out a slow breath and straightened herself out. I kept quiet and let her focus, feeling every flex of her muscles and the exertion of mystical energy. Then she used both arms to push up on the tree, lobbing it up about a foot, and then clenched both hands into fists. She proceeded to punch the tree as it continuously attempted to fall and crush us. Every punch knocked it up just enough to retract and replace each arm. Over and over, each hit fueled by her demonic power broke off chunks of bark and wood. The force she exerted wasn't close to her full power, just enough to fulfill the purpose of training. The rapid succession of punches ripped almost halfway through. Then she shot one hand up to catch and hold it in place. Her right arm was recalled to her side, hooked and tightly bound. She started focusing her energy into the fist, surging every vein throughout her arm until it felt like it was going to burst. At the apex of her intent, she punched straight through the chipped-away crater and exploded splinters and sawdust everywhere. The shockwave of expulsed energy boomed, mostly silenced by the forest. Pulsating ripples threw slices of concentrated air burst in all directions, and the desperate-to-fall tree was knocked to the side, crashed into the ground and rolling slightly before coming to a stop.
That felt good,
Alice shouted.
Shh! Keep it the fuck down!
I leaped forward, influencing her body and inflicting momentary numbness. She ignored me and darted her eyes for the next target. She searched the ground and took a minute digging out some head-sized rocks. She sorted them in a pile and then took the biggest one and lobbed it in her hand. Placing herself under a small gap in the overhead, she aligned her sight and threw the rock straight into the air. It cut through leaves and snapped branches, ascending up past the canopy. She positioned herself in a stance and shut her eyes. An expensive intuition swelled outward, painting the details all around us as crude outlines. We listened, drowning out the natural noise and focusing on the dense stone passing through air voids. Barely audible, it descended straight back down, and Alice blindly punched the air. The stone shattered with a direct hit, spilling shrapnel everywhere and finally peeling back some skin after all the endured abuse. The broken bits crumbled and she opened her eyes, holding the bleeding knuckles in view and disallowing it to heal right away. She blew some dust off and then licked the blood, pleasurefully snickering. She picked up another rock and held it tight, glancing through her peripherals until she caught something in view. With a half turn, she launched the rock at full speed at a tree. The blurry gray shape cut through the air like a bullet until it collided with a squirrel at the base of the trunk. The squirrel didn't stand a chance. Before it could even register what was approaching, it was nothing more than a popped blood balloon. The blood and guts painted the tree and leaves, and its carcass looked like it had been run over. I gasped.
Alice, what the hell?
She laughed.
Nailed him. That was not cool. Why would you do that?
Darwinism. She grabbed another stone and held it between both hands. Every other living creature fled after the falling tree. The stupid and weak don't get to linger around danger without consequence. With little effort, she pressed both sides of the rock and crushed it. She clapped her hands together, filling the air with powder, and continued looking for her next target. It was needlessly cruel. Sure, whatever. She took the final big rock about the size of her head and located a fairly smooth and thick birch tree. Sauntering in front of it, she bent her knees and planned her move, carefully considering the strength and speed needed. When she was ready, she lobbed the rock into the air and dashed toward the tree. The rock went straight up as she extended her claws, stabbing into the tree and allowing herself to climb upwards of 15 feet. Aligned with the rock, it began its descent and she kicked off the bark, twirling in the air and slashing it before it could hit the ground. Alice landed on one foot and kicked off the ground again, rolling once before jabbing her claws into the dirt and making each claw emerge directly under individual chunks of debris. 1, 2, 3, 4 clang sounds pierced the air, as 4 out of 6 of the broken bits landed on the tips of her surfaced claws. The other 2 hit with a soft thud in the dirt. Alice ripped free and stood up, angrily swiping at nothing. Damn it! That was close, I said, disappointed but encouraging. Close is not good enough. We have to be perfect. Are you even trying? I rolled my eyes. I'm doing my best. What exactly are you doing? Explain it to me, she demanded, clinking the sides of her claws together. I huffed, like reciting a prompt back to a teacher. Keeping my spirit relaxed, imagining every move you make to the finest detail I can, and projecting that to my perceived corporeal form, just like you taught me. You must be doing something wrong, she grunted. Why is it always my fault and never yours? Maybe you just aren't as good as you think. My intuition breeds instant reaction. I can't predict the unpredictable from a fucking rock. Hey, at least I'm working with you and giving you some freedom. I could have just let you rot in here. She retracted her claws, scowling. I need an opponent. This is so boring. Alice raised her hand in view and ogled at the ring. She stared at it, churning contemptuous thoughts. I washed through her eyes, tasting the apathy. It can't be removed, I said. What if I cut my finger off at the knuckle? We could be rid of this veil and do some real hunting. My finger. And remember what Chrism said. Sin and all the other Tuffle will likely assume we're dead. If that ring comes off and we're put back on the map, it's gonna be trouble. A spike of anxiety shot through my chest. She reacted to it, looking inward at me now sitting on the floor of my personal chamber. Exactly, and I fear we may not be strong enough for what lies ahead. This allotment of peace hasn't made us stronger. When we face our next threat, what makes you think we'll have a chance? The spite was retracted, now simmered to a snarky insecurity. We have gotten stronger. We work together. My inner Tuffle energy is accessible, and you move a lot more smoothly than before. You worry too much. You don't worry enough, she spat. You're slovenly, complacent, and distracted by family when you should be charged with vengeance. I shook my head. I do worry, all the time. All I do is worry and bury it. I'm not having this argument again. We've been over it 100 times. And it always comes back up because nothing changes. We should be out searching for answers, not pointlessly fighting trees in your backyard. I coddled myself. Alice, every day that goes by, I understand more that stability is on a timer that I don't know the limit of. At any second, we could be made vulnerable again. I have a bad feeling about it. She became oddly quiet. The concentration of her senses was pushed out and pulled in, like breathing in a space with limited oxygen, stiff, reserved. When she spoke, it was with more care than I expected. All right, look, you and I have endured many unique trials. You faced my bloodlust and fought for control in the beginning. Since then, I have set aside my temper and learned to lean on you. We aren't perfect, but we have a purpose. I just want to know what that is, and I fear that when our time is up, We simply won't be strong enough to justify our chance. Trust me, I get it, but there's nothing more we can do. We can't put ourselves on the map early. You certainly can't go around killing anyone, and I won't just abandon my life here. I worked too hard at it. Besides, I know you're just as afraid as I am, and this hiatus is comforting for you. She scoffed. Fuck off. That's not true. I smirked. You don't need to posture for me. It's okay. Shut your mouth. She extended her claws and immediately discarded the conversation. Now she sprinted deeper into the forest, one fist bound and the other hand wide with daggers, cutting and punching through every thickness of tree. Slashing one in half, punching through another, leaping high into the air and expulsing a wave of energy to disintegrate the foliage. She didn't slow down. She needs to let it out for both our sakes. I worked with her, influencing her movements to duck and weave between large branches, stabbing her claws into a trunk and emerging them from somewhere else at her own face to practice dodging. She started circling back to where we started. Non-stop, constant exertion, the forest quickly thinned and our presence here was etched into the dirt. She shut her eyes for the rest of the way back, continually weaving through the denser part of the forest and using her perception to avoid obstacles. It was remarkable, I had to admit. She had such a keen awareness of her surroundings and masterfully, almost gracefully, danced through the forest. We burst through a tangle of weeds and stopped in front of a large fallen oak. Slightly out of breath, her eyes darted all around and we listened. Quiet, I could tell she was in her own head now, thinking and growing more anxious about the future. Inside, I pressed my hand to the floor and felt its chill. The abyssal darkness all around my ethereal form started to thin, and I experienced a pinching tug from every direction. We done? I asked. I guess, she replied, sour. All right. And just one more thing. I have contingencies floating in my head. I've given this all a lot of individual thought. You're keeping secrets from me? No, it's nothing. Just, I've made peace with some things. So, if it comes to it, then I know what I'm going to do. She grinned. Now who's being vague? I shut my eyes and she shut hers. A whirlwind of invisible voices and muted paint streaks infected my mind, sending me in a tunnel of things meant to keep me subdued, my personal demons. By now, I had grown accustomed to the temptation to stay under, no matter the tricks, the words, and the songs. They could not keep me here. I passed through and opened my eyes to see the forest from a much more narrow perspective. Her flickering shape minimized in front of my skull and settled with a fritzing bubble. I staggered, body throbbing and legs numb. The burn from the scrape on my knuckle lasted a second before she repaired it, and I shook off my hand while approaching the tree with my hat. I slipped it on, rustling my hair from my face and keeping my breathing normalized. Her energy continued to circulate, pestering me with gore and blips of those we claimed, less intense than normal. I took a moment and sat on the ground, leaning against the tree and just waiting for everything to settle, tired. My nose squeaked with each tiny huff, and the throb in my head continued to warp my vision. I know this isn't the life either of us wanted. It's weird, unordinary, counterintuitive. I just wanted to say that I'm glad you are my tuffle. If it was any other, I think I would have been dead a long time ago. I patiently waited for her to reply, anticipating the words just as they bubbled up her throat, but she didn't. She was chewing on a response, the pressure bursting at her caged lips, but never quite escaped. That's fine with me. I didn't need to hear her say it because I knew. I knew she felt the same.